Welcome back again on episode 5 on mastering GenAI with MLflow. In this particular episode, we're going to cover about prompt management, and you're going to learn about the art of how actually can use prompt for different aspects of your project. We're going to create different versions of the prompt. We're going to see how we can actually manage them. We're going to register in the prompt registry and then do searching of the prompts and loading of the prompts dynamically, and how we can actually link prompts to a brick experiment. Now, prompt registry is an important part of GenAI platform. I talked about the 4 pillars of GenAI platform, and prompt registry is one of them. So you will get a good idea of today how to actually use prompt registry. So what are you going to learn from this episode? Very simple. We're going to deep dive into what involves in registering the prompt, how you can actually use to register a particular prompt, how you can actually search a particular prompt, how you can actually use substitution variables for different templates, and how you can actually assign aliases so it's actually easy for you to roll back from production to staging, or from prompting something from development to staging. So the question is, why actually would you actually want to use prompt? The problem is that when you actually are using multiple agents, you're going to have multiple different prompts. So each prompt will be associated with a different kind of agent you might have. You might have a prompt assistant that you need a prompt for. You actually might have a system prompt. You might have a prompt for doing some sort of a Q&A that the conversational bot is using. Having all those different prompts can sort of clutter your code. It actually helps when you have the ability to version a particular prompt, to define a particular prompt, to associate a prompt by its particular name, to assign a template so you can actually reuse it. And this gives you a huge benefits of using a sort of a prompt registry where you can manage prompts, version prompts, associate that with a particular version, and you can do different kinds of A/B testing. So the benefits are quite simple. It gives you the reproducibility. It gives you it allows you to collaborate prompts with other team members. It gives you a huge experimentation benefits of doing A/B testing by testing different versions of the prompt. And it actually gives you the governance if you're actually using, say, things like Unity Catalog, where you can actually decide who can actually use what prompts. So let's get into it. We're going to start with our setup experiment over here. As usual, in my previous experiment, I'm just running something locally, and I'm using OpenAI with the minimum model, since this is a very short tutorial we're going to use. So we have set up our auto login enable, and we're going to go ahead and create our first prompt. And when you create a first prompt, there are a couple of things you actually have to do. First thing, you have to use the API called register prompt. And the register prompt actually has a couple of variables in it as a parameter. So you're going to supply a unique name, such as tutorial.firstqa, which is what we do. And we're going to have a template. And template is where you actually define what the prompt is going to be, along with any of the substitution variables you actually might have. And then the additional things you can provide is some sort of commit message where you can actually provide a history. So when I'm scanning through the prompt registry, I know why I created this particular prompt and what version was it. And then some tags that you might want to associate with a particular prompt so you can do some searching. So we're going to go ahead and register this particular prompt. And once you actually have registered the prompt, the next thing you actually might want to do is just go ahead and load that particular prompt. And the way you load the prompt is just by the name. Hence the unique name they actually provide. So here I'm just going to go and load a particular prompt. And once I have loaded the particular prompt into a loaded object, I can now use Python-like syntax to format that particular prompt. And here I can provide my what we call substitution variables with that particular name value argument. And it's going to go in at runtime, go ahead and substitute that with variable. So when I call the VMM, all I'm doing is I'm passing my message in my prompt field, which is this particular object over here, and I'm going to run this experiment. So let's see what happens. So I registered my prompt. I go ahead and then execute that particular prompt. I formatted my prompt, and voila, I have now my call. This took me about 76 tokens, costed me about this one. If I go up over here to my prompt registry, I should see my first version of the prompt, which is version number 1. And it has all my meta tag that I processed yet. Here's what my prompt looks like. And this is what the name of the prompt is. As simple as that. Right? Let's go a little further now. What about if you actually want to create loads of variables? And this is where it's more reasonable when you're actually having real world prompts. prompts are mainly dynamic. They will have roles, they will have different contexts, they will have different tasks that you might want to do. And you want to register all this multi-variable templates directly into the register with these variables with has double curlies. And we call that Ninja 2. I don't know how we got the name, but that's what it is. And then once you actually register the particular prompt, you can actually do now using the Unix type Python type format statement to substitute a particular variable in that particular object and then supply that as part of your LLM call. So let's go ahead and see how we can actually do that. Again, very simple. We actually use our GenAI register prompt with name, template, and here the template has got several variables. We got a role, we got a context, we got a task, and then we have our commit message, and then these are my variables that I am going to supply as part of the metadata so that I can search those prompts based on that particular filter. We go ahead and register the prompt over here, and then we load the prompt. And once we load the prompt, as you can see over here, I'm filling that particular prompt with the role as one of my substitution variable with the context. This is what I want, and the task to explain that. Go ahead and do that. And here, this is where the prompt is actually filled out, and we're going to execute that. So we got the filled prompt with the appropriate variables. You are a technical documentation expert. Context was what we actually provided in the format, and task is what it said, and we got this particular prompt. If I go back to my prompt registry over here, I should see another prompt, which is this one over here, that has my template with all the substitution variables along with my version, which is version number 1. And I can actually always do anything. I can always compare those two prompts if I wanted to. So let's go ahead and now go back to our notebook over here and then see what is step number 5. So what we've done so far is we have sort of created a prompt, we have registered a prompt, and now we actually want to do some sort of versioning of the prompt. And versioning as well, it actually helps us to have different kinds of the same kind of prompt, so we can actually do what we call A/B testing. So here I'm going to create different versions of the prompt with the same name. So my first prompt is my basic minimal prompt that I actually might want to start with, and then I might go to the second version with a little tweak, and this gives me now the ability to compare the version 1 versus version 2. So here I have my basic version, I call it P1. I'll register the prompt with the same template, commit message, and then I'm going to create a second version with a slightly same name but slightly different prompt. This prompt template actually has more elaborate way of asking the LLM what is it that I want, along with a couple of substitution variables. And I'm going to go ahead and provide a committed message, edit, specialization, role, and complex. So that gives me history of why the second version was created with this commit message. I'll go ahead and register both the prompts. And as you can see, the way you actually load the prompt is you provide this particular syntax, which is a URI prompt, the tutorial, the name of the prompt, along with the version. And this is going to create the particular version number. Once we actually have that, we can actually use the format statement to fill it out, and we can actually go ahead and execute that. So as simple as that, we register 2 prompts with 2 different versions. We asked to get each version of the prompt by using the load prompt, giving a particular URI with the suffix version number. It'll fill out that particular prompt format and then execute that. So let's see what happens over here. So we created a version num with no basic guidance. We created the second version with actually 2 variables, role and guidelines. We're comparing the versions, what is MLflow, and the reason we actually got from. So first, for the first version prompt, we got the answer, which is slightly different from the second one. So this is a good way to do your A/B testing. So if you actually go back over here to see at our prompt, we should actually have several versions, right? We have version number 2, which is actually this. I can now compare that with these 2 versions. This is my version number 1, this is my version number 2, and I have this version side by side to compare when it was created, what's the difference between what are the metadata associated with it. So this is a good way in the registry to have different versions of the prompt and the ability to compare those. Okay, let's move on now. So what are the benefits you actually get when registering? Automatic versions, no manual tracking is actually needed. You don't have to worry about, oh, I'm going to call this particular prompt something else, and then I have to remember what it is. I have a commit message associated with the version that I actually created. I can load a specific version using the prompt URI, and then this gives me a history in the UI of how different versions of the prompt actually created it. You can also use aliases to associate a particular version of the prompt, and we'll talk about those, how you can actually associate aliases with that. Finally, step number 6, you can actually link prompts to the experiments. Now, when you're going to be running an experiment, you will have several runs to it. Now, there are 2 ways to do that. You can associate, you can load a particular prompt and then set an alias to it, or you can actually set an experiment name or a tag associated with it. In this particular case, all my versions of the prompts are associated with the experiment I'm running in this particular notebook. But I can provide a different experiment ID over here, and this particular now run is going to be associated with that experiment ID, and this prompt is going to be linked to that experiment. So that way you can actually always know what experiment was run, what run was run, and what prompt was associated with the particular run. It's a great way to do auditing as well. So here we're going to register, we're going to load a particular prompt of that particular version. We're going to start a run, and we'll call it QA with linked prompt. And if I wanted to associate that with an experiment other than the one that I'm running right now, I can always provide an experiment ID over here. And here's my question that I'm going to provide. I'll fill out the prompt. I'll send the request to the LLM. I'll get my response back, and then I'm just going to go and log some parameters using the MLflow API log dictionary with the prompt name, version, URI, question, answer. And this is just some artifacts that I actually might want to create. And when I'm done with that, I'll just go ahead and print this thing out. So let's look at what it looks like. So when I run this, I have now created a particular log run. This is my prompt version. This is the URI that I actually used. And then I can actually look at that particular URI in my prompt registry. So I can actually go over here, my experiment. Here is my experiment. I can look at the traces. I can look at the prompts. And you can actually see I have now, there's different versions of the prompt. I can now look at my experiment runs to find out I have this thing over here. I can look at the artifacts. I created this particular dictionary, and this is where I actually registered my artifacts. So this is a good way to add existing or additional metadata that I actually want associated with the prompt, associated with the run. Next stage is prompt registry as a shared library. Now, it's possible that you as a developer might be creating many different prompts, and you want to somehow create a library that you can actually somehow share that with your fellow developers. So in this particular step, we're actually going to create a bunch of prompts into a library. We're going to register that, and then we'll be able to search the prompts, get the one that we actually want, and then load that particular prompt for usage. So this is a good way of using prompts to share as a library in a group environment. So here I'm going to create a bunch of library prompts using the dictionary. So I have my first prompt called QSimple that has the template, the variables that I need to substitute when I'm going to be loading that particular prompt. What is my use case, which is just a metadata. My second prompt is QA with the text. I have its particular template with a couple of substitution variables. And then I have my classification prompt that actually has the same thing. So I have 3 different prompts, and I'm going to go ahead and print those prompts to see what it looks like. And the next thing I'm going to go is register each and every particular prompt. So I iterate through the dictionary. I associate a prompt name with something prefix called tutorial, so that way I can avoid particular conflicts. I'm going to register each and every prompt. And for my metadata as tags, I'll have the use case, the variables that I actually have, list of variables that I have, and then the author who actually created this particular library. I'll register the particular prompt name, and then let's go ahead and see what it actually happens. So now I actually have registered 3 different prompts. Each were created with version 1. By default, every time you actually create a prompt with a particular name, you associate the first version of it. And if I go back to my prompts, I should see all my classification prompt, my tutorial first, and my simple QA. These are my 3 prompts I just created as a particular library. And then once I actually have the library, I can actually share that with people in the prompt registry, and I can load the specific type of the prompt by just using its name. So here I'm going to load the prompt from the library, such as load the particular prompt. I'm going to go ahead and fill the particular prompt with the questions that I actually have. I'm going to send it to my LLM for that particular query. Same thing, I can load the Q&A prompt for classification. And let's see what it looks like. So we're going to go ahead and use the particular library. We're going to load the prompt by a particular name. We're going to use the substitute variables using the questions that we actually want. And now we actually have our prompt. You can see I have two different prompts that I extracted from the library, and I use them for that. So library is a good way for collaboration. You can actually have multiple prompts. You can have several prompts that you actually want to use for different things, and you can share that and register and version it and name it appropriately so people can actually find it. And this is a good way to discover prompts if you're actually working in a particular group. So having a library is a good practice. Another thing you can actually do with prompt management is the ability to assign aliases to prompts for environment management. So let's say you actually are doing development, and you're doing, from development, you're going to move to staging, and from staging, you're actually going to move to production. And you want to be able to associate some version of the prompt that you're actually going to say, okay, this is going to be the version that I care about, and I want to put this in staging, or I want to put that in production. So you can assign an alias to that particular prompt. So what happens at this particular prompt is that now a version of a particular prompt is tagged or is aliased as this is going to be the production. So in your production environment, you don't have to know what version of the prompt. You just associate or load that with a particular alias. And this is a good way, for example, to say, okay, oh, something actually happened with the prompt in the production alias. I'm going to roll it back to a staging version, or I'm going to roll it back to a development version. So this is a good, effective way of managing the prompt and the ability to seamlessly go from production alias to rolling back to, say, a staging alias. So let's go ahead and have two sets of prompts over here. I'm going to set up a prompt for staging, and I'm going to set up a prompt for production, and I'm going to set a prompt for aliasing, right? And I'll switch it back and forth between both staging and aliasing. So this is my first version of the prompt. I've set the alias to be production, and it's going to be a version number 1. And I'm going to use the same prompt, but I'm going to call it staging as an alias in version 1. And then later on, I can always bump it up to stage number 2 and then go back and forth, right? So here, I'm going to load the prompt using the production aliases, you can see over here. And I'll load the production areas. I'll fill up a particular format, and I'll go ahead and execute that particular. So what I've done is I've created two versions, two aliases. One is production, one is alias. Both are pointing to version number 1. Both are pointing to the same one. Now I'm going to go ahead and change the alias to a different version, and I'll call that one production, and the other one is going to be still alias. I can always roll back. So this is my new version of the prompt, and I'm going to register this particular prompt as production, and I'm going to go ahead and execute that. And what I now have is I've registered my second version, and I promoted this particular version to be staging. And then if I actually have to roll back to staging, I can actually just use the alias staging to roll back. Another way you can actually use prompts effectively is the ability to search prompts. And searching is actually a good way to be able to discover what prompts are available. So here I'm going to search the registry by a particular prompt name. I can either filter it by name, I can do some matching. So this is actually a good way for you to be able to search different kind of prompts. So here I found 5 prompts with the author Jules, and then I can decide which of the 2s that I actually want, and I can also find another prompt called reg Q&A with that particular name. And then search tips are you can actually use author, you can actually use use case, as I did with my tags, or I can actually have tags as author and Q&A. So this is sort of a good way for you to discover different prompts, because you're going to have a registry that will have hundreds of prompts, and you have the ability to search those quite effectively using tags or using names and other things. So what we learned today here is best practices for creating and managing prompts. Create prompts with descriptive names. Use tags generously so you can actually search that effectively. Use descriptive name for your variables, so that way you know and read them well. And then provide meaningful commit messages. Those are different from, say, when you're writing a Python script and you're using Git to commit yourself. You want to have a good commit messages. Versioning is actually a good way for you to be able to manage different prompts, and then using aliases, you can actually go from staging to production and then roll back to staging just by the particular alias name. And prompt registry is actually a good way to collaborate among people. So searching is one way to find out who has created what prompts, and having a library with hundreds of prompts is a good way to have a general mechanism where prompts are registered. So in summary, prompt registry is actually a good way to do prompt management. Register your prompt with the registered AI. We actually used Ninja variables to do substitution during runtime. You can actually register a prompt with good commit messages, how you can actually use aliases, how you can actually search prompts. And this is actually a good way to use prompt management. So key takeaway is prompt registry is a good source of truth. It has the ability for you to do A/B testing, having different versions of the prompt. You can provide aliases to different kinds of prompts, so you can actually do rollback. And thank you for joining me.